Welcome to another story made by Oracle 1. The Star and the Rabbi. Berlin, 1938. It was a cold October afternoon when Liesel Weber tightened the collar of her school uniform and stepped onto the cobblestone street of her neighborhood in Friedrichshain. Carving a path between the leafless chestnut trees, she carried a small bundle wrapped in a faded blue cloth, the gift she had hurriedly wrapped that morning, a pressed bouquet of wildflowers for her best friend Miriam Stein. The two had been inseparable since nursery school, two souls entwined despite the fractured world unraveling around them. Liesel was 10 years old, and until recently, the complexities of the world beyond her little street were simple: school, laughter, and the kind smiles of her family. But those days were beginning to ebb away, even as the autumn leaves continued to fall. Liesel's breath came in white puffs, mingling with the subtle smoke rising from chimneys. The air smelled faintly of coal and remembrance, a scent that seemed to cling to Berlin itself these days. The politics her parents murmured about at the dinner table grew louder every day on the streets, in the newspapers, and in the whispers passed by neighbors. Juden raus, Deutsche Reinheit. Slogans that made no sense to her but planted an uneasy seed in her young heart. When she reached Miriam's doorstep, her hand trembled before knocking. The building was the same brick structure they had always known, but the curtains were drawn tight, and an ominous silence lay over the apartment. "Miriam?" Liesel called softly. No answer. She glanced around. There were soldiers on the streets, their dark uniforms stark against the gray of the buildings, yet none stood in front of this house. But across the street, other families gathered with anxious faces, clutching hastily packed suitcases or holding hands tightly, some with tears streaking down their faces. The shopkeepers were closing early, their faces grim. A heavy weight pressed on Liesel's chest, a dread she didn't want to feel. It had started a few days before, with schoolmates being picked upon and sent home early. Danny Katz in her class was no longer allowed to stay for lunch. Miriam's father, the Rabbi Stein, had been warned to close their synagogue during certain hours, and Miriam no longer wore the yellow star. Not yet, but whispers told of an approaching storm. That evening, after dusk had darkened the sky and the city noises dimmed, Liesel sat by her bedroom window, clutching a lace handkerchief Miriam had given her for her birthday. Her mind raced with questions. Should she tell her parents what she saw? Would they understand? Would they believe? Could she do anything? The next day, school was grimmer. Her classmates, who only a week before had played and joked with Miriam, now avoided her gaze. Rumors had spread rapidly, everyone was scared. The air was thick with tension. Even the teachers spoke in hushed tones and disappeared into offices for long discussions. Liesel's father came home that evening with a dark look. He was a machinist working at an armaments factory. His hands were calloused from labor, but there was strain now etched in his face. "The government is making changes," he said, voice low but firm. "We must be cautious. Tell your friends carefully, Liesel. It's not safe to be too close to certain families anymore." Liesel's heart quaked. What about Miriam? Her father looked at her with sorrow. "You know our country is changing. For their safety, some are being made to leave their homes. You must understand. But she's my friend. She's just like me," Liesel whispered. Her father closed his eyes, then shook his head. Things are not as simple as friendship anymore. Days later, school dismissed early. Liesel hurried home, hoping to find Miriam on the street, as they had promised to visit the cinema to see the new animated film. But her street was deserted near Miriam's house. Posters plastered on walls announced new decrees. Jews were forbidden from entering public parks, cinemas, and other places. Her stomach churned. An acquaintance from the bakery told her in a hushed voice that the Stein family had been taken away. "Last night," he whispered. "The SS came at dawn and packed them into trucks." Liesel felt light-headed, then numb. She wanted to deny it, to believe that Miriam and her family were safe somewhere. But in her heart, she knew this was the beginning of something terrible. Days passed. The neighborhood was quieter. Empty apartments stood like graves, their windows blacked out, doors nailed shut. Miriam's house too was empty. Liesel avoided the neighbors who used to smile at her, their eyes now cold and distant as if afraid to be associated with the girl who had once played with the Stein children. One afternoon, she found herself at the synagogue where Miriam's father had once led prayers. The doors were locked, a blue star crudely painted across the windows, and signs warning that entry was forbidden to Jews and those connected to them. Liesel stood before the door, memories flooding, the warmth of Rabbi Stein's voice chanting ancient prayers, the smell of old books, the playful chatter of children. Tears stung her eyes as she pressed her hand against the cold wood. A rustle behind her made her turn. A man, wearing a dark coat and a worn hat, approached cautiously. "Liesel Weber?" he asked softly. She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I am Jakob, a friend of your family, and of theirs." He extended a hand, which she shook hesitantly. "I come to warn you. It is not safe to be seen with us anymore. Many have disappeared without a trace." "Why?" Liesel's voice cracked. "Why are my friends taken?" Jakob looked at her, his eyes heavy with sorrow. "Because the government wants to blame us for the hardships, for their vision of a pure nation. But you, child, you must choose your path." Liesel swallowed hard. "I don't want to choose. I just want Miriam." Jakob placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then remember her, speak of her, and never stop asking why. The world needs people like you who remember, who carry the truth." As he turned to leave, Liesel felt a profound resolve settle within her. That evening, Liesel sat at her small desk, a candle flickering nearby. She pulled out the diary her mother had given her for her 10th birthday and began to write, chronicling what she had seen and felt. "I am afraid," she wrote. "I do not understand why friends disappear and why the world changes so fast. But I know I must remember Miriam and her family. I will not forget what happened to them. My country says they are enemies, but I know they are just like us. I hope one day this darkness will end." Over the coming weeks, the neighborhood transformed further. New laws forbade Jewish children from attending school. Miriam's name was called no longer when names were read aloud. Liesel watched as some families packed what little they could carry and left, some silently sobbing, others with determined faces. Her mother urged her to stay away from the Stein house. "It's not safe, Liesel," she said, voice heavy. "You must think of yourself." But Liesel could not stay away. One cold afternoon, clutching a small bundle of bread and apples, she approached the empty doorstep. She sat there quietly, imagining her friend would return. Suddenly, a soft hand covered hers. Startled, she looked up into the face of an elderly woman, her gray eyes filled with grief and strength. "Your friend would have been glad to see you," the woman said. "They needed kindness in those dark times." Liesel nodded. "I don't understand why." The woman smiled gently but sadly. "Sometimes, the greatest darkness is when we forget our humanity. But remember, child, even a small light can shine in the night." And with those words, she disappeared into the shadows. Years passed. Berlin was no longer the city of Liesel's childhood. Ruined buildings scarred the skyline. Friends were lost, and neighbors turned wary of each other. But in the quiet corners of her heart, Liesel kept the memory of Miriam alive. During the war, letters were forbidden between families torn apart. But Liesel's diary survived hidden beneath a loose floorboard, filled with stories and questions she could not voice aloud. When the war ended, and Berlin was scarred but still standing, Liesel, now a young woman, returned to her childhood street. Many houses were destroyed, the Stein home was among them. She knelt among the rubble and placed a small flower she had carefully nurtured in the garden she remembered Miriam loved. "I will tell your story," she whispered. "So the world knows what happened, and so the stars can shine again." Years later, Liesel became a teacher, dedicating her life to educating children about the dangers of hatred and the importance of friendship and courage. In every lesson, she spoke of her friend Miriam Stein, the rabbi's daughter, who once showed a girl named Liesel what true loyalty meant, not loyalty to the twisted ideology of a government, but to the enduring bonds of compassion and humanity. For more stories, like and subscribe.